Madame la Présidente, mes chers amis, honorables invités et amis de la résistance iranienne, mes chers frères et sœurs, iraniens et iraniennes, et je salue particulièrement à travers vous les frères iraniens qui observent la grève de la faim en cette période douloureuse pour la résistance iranienne et pour le peuple iranien. Je vous salue et je commence par m'incliner humblement devant les très chères victimes de ce sinistre 1er septembre 2013. 52 héros et martyrs de la résistance iranienne qui comptaient parmi la crème de la résistance populaire iranienne. Il n'y a pas de mot assez fort pour exprimer notre douleur. Il n'y a pas de qualificatif assez dur pour condamner la barbarie et l'abjection des commanditaires de ce crime contre l'humanité. Et il n'y a pas de mise en garde assez insistante pour s'indigner du silence et de l'inaction devant le crime contre l'humanité. Madame la Présidente Mariam Rajavi, dans une exhortation adressée hier au haut commissaire, à la haute commissaire des droits de l'homme, disait, je la cite, « Personne ne pourra dire aujourd'hui qu'il n'a pas vu venir l'horrible massacre qui vient d'être commis. » À son tour, Tahar Boumedra, dans une intervention au sein du Palais des Nations, les USA, l'administration US, l'ONU, le gouvernement irakien ne pouvaient pas, il est impossible d'ignorer, ils ne pouvaient pas ignorer ce qui s'est passé, ils ne pouvaient pas ignorer ce qui se passe en ce qui concerne les otages. Et il est intéressant de savoir, lire exactement ce type de comportement à un moment où l'on parle déjà d'une reprise des négociations entre l'administration des États-Unis et le régime iranien. Je crains très sérieusement que cette même erreur, on a vu ses résultats, soit commise encore maintenant qu'on parle de rapprochement entre le président Obama et le président Rouhani. Il faut que les États-Unis d'Amérique n'oublient pas les leçons du passé. En 1939, là aussi, les nations européennes ont pratiqué la politique de l'appeasement vis-à-vis de Hitler, vis-à-vis du régime nazi de l'époque. Et ça a donné Munich, et ça a donné une guerre mondiale qui a provoqué la mort de plus de 100 millions de personnes. Ça a donné l'Holocauste, ça a donné les camps de concentration, et ça a donné Oradour-sur-Glane, dont on vient de commémorer l'anniversaire, et qui ressemble point par point à ce qui vient de se passer à Ashraf. Oradour-sur-Glane, c'est une ville, un village où la soldatesque nazie est rentrée et elle a mitraillé exactement comme on l'a fait à Ashraf la population désarmée innocente. Ça a donné 600 morts. Alors, un régime dictatorial ne peut pas être crédible. Un régime dictatorial ne peut pas être ramené à récipiscence par la négociation. Et c'est pour ça que Mme Rajavi, depuis 10 ans que j'entends son discours, elle dit la troisième voie. Ni la guerre qui ne peut que servir le régime et le transformer en victime, ni la complaisance et la négociation. La voie, la troisième voie, c'est laisser le peuple iranien abattre ce régime. Il est le seul capable, ne pas entraver la résistance iranienne, ne pas entraver la seule force politique capable de mettre par terre ce régime. Et il y va non seulement de la crédibilité des États-Unis d'Amérique, mais aussi de ses conséquences. Moi, je considère que si l'administration américaine est touchée dans sa crédibilité, eh bien c'est la voie ouverte au désordre, pas à l'ordre qui est censé être assuré par les Nations Unies et par les États-Unis d'Amérique. Et enfin, je reviens à cette J'exhorte l'administration US et dans son sillage les États-Unis, les Nations Unies. Je les exhorte à ne pas sous-estimer les dégâts que peuvent commettre des régimes dictatoriaux et à leur tête un régime comme le régime iranien. Souvenez-vous, parce qu'on a tendance à l'oublier, cette personne, tuer cette personne, c'est absolument rien pour ce régime-là. En 1988, il y avait dans les prisons iraniennes 30 000 prisonniers politiques. Retenez bien, 30 000 prisonniers politiques qui avaient été jugés par la justice du régime des mollahs et condamnés les uns à 3 ans de prison, les autres à 5, les autres à 10, les autres à 20. Donc, il y avait une décision de justice. Eh bien, en une fatwa, en 1988, Khomeini a donné l'ordre d'exécuter ces 30 000 personnes. Et cela a été fait en 3 mois. Cela a été fait en 3 mois devant une conspiration dissidence internationale qui est vraiment bouleversante. Alors, si les Américains, si les Nations Unies laissent passer encore cette histoire de cet otage, et si par malheur il leur arrive quoi que ce soit, qu'ils sachent bien que ça sera de leur part compris comme un signal par le régime iranien qui a le feu vert pour écraser tout le reste. Voilà. Donc on ne cessera pas. L'OMPI, depuis des années, n'a jamais cessé quotidiennement de mettre en garde la communauté internationale à la menace sur Assad. Malgré la succession des tortures physiques, les intrusions militaires, les massacres d'innocents, eh bien, j'ai l'impression que les grands acteurs internationaux continuent à lire ces événements un peu comme l'autruche qui, devant le danger, s'enfonce la tête dans le sable pour ne pas voir le danger. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. After 30 years of national security experience, you learn that very few things happen by accident. One event can be isolated. 2 become suspect. Now we have 3 instances just this year where the people of Camp Liberty and Camp Ashraf have come under significant attack on top of the previous tragedies that occurred in recent years. 5 attacks do not represent a coincidence. They are a military campaign. We can no longer pretend that the government of Iraq is a mere bystander in this unfolding tragedy. We are not dealing with happenstance. We are dealing with conscious decisions made by Iraq, and those choices place the residents of Camp Liberty in grave and persistent danger. As we heard from Mr. Modasan, the government of Iraq wants us to believe that there was a dispute among the residents themselves. The government of Iraq wants us to believe that there were explosives at the camp. The government of Iraq wants us to believe that they had nothing to do with it. The government of Iraq refuses to even acknowledge that it is holding the 7 hostages. As we know, these assertions are simply not credible, and we have the evidence to prove it. It would be easy to forget, what are 52 lives lost in Iraq when we hear about figures like 1,000 lives being lost every week in Syria. But the difference is that the international community, led by the United States, pledged to help these people safely move out of Iraq and out of harm's way. First, the 7 individuals in Iraqi custody should be released immediately and reunited with their colleagues at Camp Liberty. All governments, and especially my government, should demand both publicly and privately that they be released. We should push beyond the Iraqi denials and gain access to the 7 so that their conditions of confinement can be documented. And we should keep this pressure on the Iraqi government until they are released. UNHCR has been steadfast in its demands that the 7 are asylum seekers and subject to international protection. We need to demand that Iraq abide by international norms in this case as well. Second, the security at Camp Liberty is simply not adequate in the environment where additional attacks must be expected. Their security must become a higher priority. And I would ask, joining my colleagues, that the United Nations become even more actively engaged in security improvements on the ground, including placing blue-helmeted personnel on the grounds of Camp Liberty itself. The facts are undeniable, withstanding the posting of Prime Minister Maliki's website, but the status quo is unacceptable. The consistent delays by the government of Iraq in allowing basic security provisions into the camp, T-walls, bunkers, sandbags, and other measures should no longer be tolerated. Security is a basic human right. The people at Liberty disarmed. The people at Liberty agreed to relocate. The people at Liberty accepted international assurances they would be safe. The people at Liberty are now under assault. The people at Liberty are now getting killed. The people at Liberty remain in danger. What is in doubt is not the courage of the people at Camp Liberty. What is in doubt is what the international community is prepared to do to support them and to defend them. Now, in recent months, as we saw civilians threatened and then killed by chemical weapons in Syria, the international community and the United States drew a red line and said this violates international norms, and for that there should be consequences. Should there not be a red line regarding the attacks on Liberty and Ashraf as well? These attacks are unacceptable and need to stop. We must uphold human rights for all, including the human rights of the people at Camp Liberty. If we affirm an international responsibility to protect, it must have meaning in this world, or if it has any meaning in this world, it must apply to Camp Liberty. Doors need to open in Europe and America. People need to be moved out of harm's way, not someday, but today. As we all know, there is no time to lose. Thank you very much.
Madam Razavi, my honored guests and distinguished speakers, I want to take a moment here to talk about you. You've been very patient listening to incredibly well-respected individuals, international figures, people who have an important message not only to you, but also to their respective governments. You've sat here for many hours as we all have looked at these pictures of these people who were killed in cold blood. I was thinking as I was sitting here how much pain you feel in your hearts for the lives that were dedicated to the cause that we all share. You have sat here patiently, knowing that 7 hostages' lives are in immediate danger. When I looked at the video that you just saw with us, of those people who were lined up and handcuffed and shot in cold blood, it was just another vision that reminded me of those children and innocent people who were lined up in Damascus and who had been killed by a similar dictator. That was a crime against humanity that was committed, and your emotions deserve to be registered. And I understand it. And I'm sympathetic. And you have called on international organizations, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. You've called on the governments of Europe, and you've also called on my government to act. The most important thing is to make sure that the Prime Minister of Iraq understands that it is not merely an appeal from us to him, but that there will be consequences. Consequences to him personally, consequences to his government, and consequences to the relationships that fuel his capacity to continue leading his country. That's point one. You came from far and wide to have people here hear your voices as well. I promise you I've heard your voice. I promise you that I will do everything I can. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Madam Rajavi. What else needs to happen before the international community finally understands that the life of Iranian refugees is in permanent danger under the current circumstances in Iraq? How many dead? How many wounded? How many hostages are necessary for the international community to do something really effective for the life of Iranian refugees? What else needs Naip Pillai? What else needs Ban Ki-moon? What else needs the USA administration and the European Union community? How long the life of Iranian refugees should be in the hands of pro-Iranian government in Iraq? How long will the international community look elsewhere to the sorry plight of Iranian refugees? How long? Are we going to be late once again? How much evidence? Today we talk about the recent massacre in Camp Ashraf, in which 52 defenseless people were killed in a brutal attack in which Iraqi forces abducted 7 members of the camp, including 6 women. Nearly 100 unarmed and defenseless refugees, members of the main Iranian opposition movement PMOI, have remained in Ashraf according to a quadripartite agreement signed between US, UN, Iraq and PMOI on August 17, 2012. They were in charge of the supervision of the property of the 3,000 others who were moved from Ashraf to Liberty near Baghdad last year until the property could be sold or compensated. Since 2009, when US forces handed over the protection of Ashraf to the Iraqi forces, the camp has been attacked several times by Iraqi forces. The last massacre of defenseless refugees who all have the status of protected persons under the 4th Geneva Convention and were also declared people of concern by the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, is tantamount to a crime against humanity. But in fact, why are we here today? We strongly condemn the events of September the 1st in Camp Ashraf. So, what have we come to request here? First, we ask the urgent release to the 7 hostages by Iraq. We request that the Iraqi government must be held to account And also, there must be an independent international investigation into the Camp Ashraf massacre. We ask to a station of a permanent blue helmet team at Camp Liberty. We call for the provision of urgent protective equipment at Camp Liberty, including double-layer roofs for trailers and the return of T-walls and concrete bunkers. I know that many relatives and supporters of the residents have gone into hunger strike in London, Berlin, Ottawa, in Camp Liberty, and here in Geneva. And the only remaining means to put pressure on the international community to act. They must not ignore it. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Madam President Rajavi, first of all, I wish to express the solidarity of myself and of a lot of colleagues in the Belgian Parliament with your movement. Mrs. Rajavi, we are convinced that the Iranian resistance under your leadership, with a secular platform and its commitment to democracy, is the best alternative to the ruling religious regime in Iran. This year marked the 25th anniversary of the execution of 30,000 political prisoners in the summer of 1988 in Iran. Most of them were also members of the PMOI. The victims of these executions were buried in mass graves scattered in Iran. Many, however, were buried in the Kavaran cemetery in Tehran. And even today, the families of these victims are still left wandering in and around the graveyard, not knowing where their loved ones have been buried. It seems like the PMOI is destined to pay a very heavy price for freedom in Iran. What happened in Ashraf 20 days ago is just another tragic example. I felt upset and angry when I learned about the attack on Camp Ashraf. I know that many of these victims were senior members of the PMOI. Some of them have even been political prisoners during the regime of the Shah. Dear friends, I share your grief, and I can say it's almost tangible here today. But I'm also convinced that you feel very proud of your brothers and sisters, the 52 over there, because of their resistance and because of their battle for the freedom of a democratic Iran. Now, each time when I meet Mrs. Rajavi, I always feel compelled to say something about the women of Iran. I admire their resilience and I admire their courage. Today, I must say I was very sad to learn of the death of Mrs. Zoran Aimi. She's there. Who was the Deputy Secretary General of the PMOI. She was a political prisoner for 5 years before going to Ashraf, and she was the leader of Camp Ashraf in the last 11 months. People like Zohre will always be remembered, and it is only the opposition of Iran that allows competent women like Zohre to carry heavy responsibilities. Dear friends, the massacre and executions of 52 defenseless refugees is a clear indication that the mullahs see the PMOI as the only true alternative. That is why they want to destroy and exterminate you. But as history will prove, the mullahs will fail. It is just a matter of time before they will be overthrown. Our Western governments should not be fooled by the political moves of the regime and its new president, Hassan Rouhani. He just is a new phase on an old and decayed dictatorship. He follows the goals of his predecessors. Now, last Tuesday, in the Foreign Affairs Committee in my parliament, I personally questioned our foreign minister about the events in Camp Ashraf. He answered that the UN is conducting its own investigation into the massacre, but that he shares the opinion that the results must be made public. I should add that our main concern at this moment is, of course, the immediate release and the well-being of the 7 Ashraf hostages. The Iraqi government must release and transfer them to Camp Liberty, where the rest of their brothers and sisters are. I want to express my solidarity with the families and friends of these hostages who are on hunger strike in Liberty and everywhere else in the world. We need to make sure that we would be able to protect the 3,000 people who are staying in Camp Liberty. So those protective walls must be returned to Liberty. And in conclusion, I will say the Iraqi government must stop playing games with the international community. And if they continue to harass and harm the refugees, the EU must reconsider its diplomatic and trade relationships with this regime. Thank you.
Señora Mariam Rajavi, autoridades y representantes políticos de diferentes países aquí presentes, amigas y amigos del movimiento de resistencia iraní. Una vez más, tengo el orgullo y el privilegio de poder comparecer ante todos ustedes. Un orgullo y un privilegio que también se entremezclan con un sentimiento profundo, mezcla de tristeza e indignación. Bajo el disfraz de la moderación, el gobierno surgido de unas elecciones pseudopresidenciales no democráticas continúa aplicando en Irán más de lo de siempre. ¿Qué moderación existe en un país en el que se vulneran de forma permanente los derechos humanos, en el que no se tiene acceso a la libre información ni tiene cabida la libertad de expresión, en el que los derechos de las mujeres son pisoteados, donde hay prisioneros políticos y se producen ejecuciones públicas? Un país en el que el mismo presidente elegido pseudodemocráticamente puede ser destituido por alguien llamado líder supremo. ¿Moderación? No, pero sí terror, represión, intolerancia, cárcel y muerte. Eso sí hay en Irán. Lo ocurrido en Ashraf, amigos, es un crimen contra la humanidad. Lo es, señores. Sí, señora Bolurucci, es un crimen contra la humanidad. El Gobierno de España ha condenado enérgicamente la violencia que ha acabado con la vida de 52 personas, a la vez que ha mostrado sus condolencias a las familias de las víctimas. Y al igual que yo, hoy aquí, exige una investigación de los hechos que permitan llevar a los responsables ante la justicia. Ahora que todos los refugiados están en Liberty, hay que garantizar la protección de los mismos y asegurarnos de que no vuelvan a volver a ser atacados. Y no olvidemos que esa protección no solo es cuestión de humanidad y de ética, que también, sino de cumplimiento de la legalidad internacional. Y en ello la ONU, la Unión Europea y los Estados Unidos tienen también mucho que decir. El odio contra las mujeres iraníes ha vuelto también a manifestarse, bien con la muerte o bien con la toma de rehenes. Y no es difícil, amigos, saber por qué. La misoginia es fruto del miedo. Miedo que tienen porque son conocedores de la fuerza y del valor de esas mujeres que, como usted, señora Rajavi, demuestran día a día en la lucha por la justicia y por la defensa de la libertad de su pueblo. El camino puede parecer largo y difícil, y lo es, pero no están solos. Y el acto de hoy, con la presencia de todos nosotros, es una buena muestra de ello. Amigos, soy política, sí, senadora, y también soy mujer. Y como tal, quiero también reconocer el mérito y el sacrificio de todas ustedes, de las que están y de las que, por desgracia, ya no podrán acompañarnos, por conseguir un Irán en el que hombres y mujeres tengan los mismos derechos. Un Irán, en definitiva, democrático. Y, por tanto, señores, por tanto, amigos, un Irán libre. Muchas gracias.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السيدة مريم رجوي الرئيس المنتخبة للمقاومة الإيرانية، أيها الإخوة الحضور، أنا العميد الركن مثقال الطيش نعيمي من القيادة المشتركة للجيش الحر في سوريا. جئتكم من سوريا الجريحة التي مضى على جرحها أكثر من 2.5 سنين، وهي تتعرض لمختلف أنواع الجرائم، حيث القتل والتدمير والتهجير والاعتقالات جراء استخدام النظام المجرم في سوريا وحلفائه النظام الإيراني وحزب الله لمختلف أنواع الأسلحة بما فيها الأسلحة الكيميائية. أيها الإخوة، جئتكم معزيا الشعب الإيراني المظلوم ممثلا بالمعارضة الإيرانية ورئيستها السيدة مريم رجوي بالضحايا الذين اغتالهم ثقتهم بالحماية الدولية لهم، والتي عقد فيها اتفاق بينهم وبين القوات الأمريكية وثم تحول إلى الحكومة العراقية التي تعهدت بحمايتهم، ثم ثانيا عصابات النظام الإيراني المجرمة من قوات القدس بقيادة سليماني وقوة سوات العراقية وقوات من الفرقة الذهبية العراقية. وأعلمكم أيها الإخوة أن من قتل هؤلاء هو الذي قتل 200,000 شهيد في سوريا. من قتل هؤلاء هو الذي انتزع السيادة من الدولة اللبنانية. إنها غرفة عمليات مشتركة يشترك فيها قادة من النظام السوري المجرم ومن النظام الإيراني ومن حزب الله في لبنان. وهنا أحيي المضربين عن الطعام تضامنا مع إخوتهم المعتقلين عند المالكي في العراق، وأطالب الحكومات والعالم كله بالضغط على حكومة العراق للإفراج عن المعتقلين. أيها الإخوة، إن معظم جرائمهم التي يرتكبونها يلصقوها ويؤلفوا مسرحيات ويلصقوها للآخرين. في سوريا حاليا من استخدم النظام الكيميائي على مرأى العالم كله يلصقون التهمة لأحد الألوية في دمشق وهو لواء الإسلام. ألا يستوجب وقفة من دول العالم واتخاذ الإجراءات المناسبة لمحاسبة النظام السوري المجرم ومن يشترك معه بارتكاب هذه المجازر؟ فهل يكفي القرار بجمع الأسلحة الكيميائية وإتلافها إن حدث ذلك؟ وهذا يعطي لكل دكتاتور أن يستخدم أسلحة كيميائية ويقتل الآلاف ثم يصدر قرار بجمع هذه الأسلحة وإتلافها. أليست هذه الضحايا التي سقطت من أطفال ونساء وشيوخ وهم نيام كافية لتحرك مشاعر العالم ويتخذ موقفا موحدا لمحاسبة هذا النظام على ما ارتكبه من مجازر وإحالته إلى محكمة الجنايات الدولية؟ أيها الإخوة، سمعت اليوم من وسائل الإعلام أن رئيس النظام الإيراني حسن روحاني شريك النظام السوري بالجرائم وبكل ما يتعرض له، وهذا مثبت بإعلانه أن وقوفه أمام وزير خارجية سوريا أن وقوفه وموقفه لن يتغير مع النظام السوري، بل أحد أعوانه قال أن سوريا هي المحافظة 35. الآن على وسائل الإعلام يعرض أنه سيساعد في تسهيل الحوار بين المعارضة والنظام. أي معارضة تقبل بحسن روحاني؟ أي معارضة تقبل أو أي معارضة تقبل بأحد أفراد النظام الإيراني المشترك مع النظام السوري بالحوار؟ نحن نرفض ذلك قطعا باتا، وأنا أتيت إلى هنا ومعي تفويض من 100 قائد ميداني على الأرض أننا نرفض أي تفاوض أو أي اجتماع يكون فيه طرف من النظام الإيراني. أيها الأخوة، نحن في سوريا سنواصل كفاحنا حتى يتحقق النصر ونحقق الحرية لشعبنا، وأحذر أن لا ينخدع العالم بابتسامة حسن روحاني، لأنه مجرم وما زال ينفذ الإعدامات في إيران ويزج بالمتطرفين إلى سوريا، ونحن لدينا إثباتات بعد أن تولى نفس الوتيرة، بل زادت وتيرة الدعم للنظام السوري والإمداد بالمقاتلين. والسلام عليكم.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Madam Rajavi, ladies and gentlemen, this is not an easy time to speak when 52 of my friends, like Hussein, were executed in cold blood. Hussein and Zora were very good friends, and after their murder, I tried to count all the times we worked together, we had communications. And constantly I remembered another good memory of working with these very, very fine people. Mrs. Rajavi, ladies and gentlemen, residents of Liberty, my deepest sympathy for the atrocity that has been allowed to happen. As pointed out earlier today, many times, this was foreseeable. When I was at Camp Ashraf, I took numerous photos of the entire camp. On the north side of Camp Ashraf, where the bunker area is located, where PMOI had their vast amount of ordnance, and it is a large, large compound. Maliki put an Iraqi division and headquarters there. Division headquarters complete with tanks and all the equipment on the north side of Camp Ashraf. The assault forces, the uniforms they are wearing are identical to Maliki's Special Weapons and Tactics Forces. The tactics they are using in my civilian job when I was on Department of Energy's Special Weapons and Tactics team guarding 2 nuclear reactors were identical to the type of training that we were doing. When you look at that video footage, you see them stacked up like the Americans do. You see them carrying the weapons like the Americans' SWAT teams carry them. What you don't see Americans doing is having silencers on the end of the weapons. That was murder when somebody comes in with silencers on the end of the weapons. Also, you look at the explosives that was set up. That's where I see some real big differences. The American ordnance was there, dated 2006. You remember, MEK, PMOI turned all their ordnance over to us in 2003. You did not have access to 2006. That was issued to Maliki's forces by the Americans. Then I look at the cell phones and the wiring attached to some of the explosives. That is what we were dealing with our terrorist adversaries. Those forces, Maliki's SWAT team, combined American tactics with terrorist tactics and with their embedded Code Force trainers. You saw the double handcuffs, metal handcuff and what we call the zip cuffs, the plastic that come through holding the hands together. If an investigation was done quickly and professionally by the United Nations and forced by the U.S. State Department, we would have gone in, we would have found out who manufactured those zip cuffs, who manufactured those handcuffs. We already see who manufactured the ordnance. There is only one force in the world that could have done that attack, and that is the Iraqi military. The investigation. That investigation should have commenced within 24 hours. It should have been completed within 72, because in law enforcement we know one thing. If you haven't completed an investigation within 72 hours, the chances of getting it done right after that diminishes greatly. And now, we are 3 weeks, going on 21 days since the event happened, and we're still talking about an investigation. It's time to stop talking. State Department people were afraid to leave the security of the Baghdad compound for 3 days, and finally 2 of them did go. I am willing right now to go and do the investigation at Camp Ashraf, if that's what it takes, on behalf of State Department. Where are the investigations that they called upon for the 2 rocket attacks that hit Liberty and the 2 ground assaults, which was clearly Maliki's forces there? We still don't have them. In closing, I say the U.S. State Department has defaulted, and the United Nations has defaulted on every agreement made with the residents. Meanwhile, the residents have honored every one of those agreements. On September 1st, 2013, 52 deaths and 7 hostages taken became testimonials to the consequence of UN and U.S. State Department default, and it became the price of honor paid by the residents of Ashraf. Thank you.
Madam Rajavi, friends, our time together is coming to a close. When we leave here today, we will each find our own way to gather our sorrow and our tears to deal with the unthinkable, the loss of family and friends. But we are in a movement to save a people. You must gather your anger and your sorrow into determination. There's a wonderful line by Martin Luther King in the struggle of his people for freedom. He said, "The arc of history bends slowly, but it bends towards justice." I said to you earlier, the one thing we know about this struggle, the only thing we know, is that in the end we win. Because in human history, justice does prevail. All of us who may not share your heritage but share your determination are pledged to be with you every day, every year, in every sacrifice until this fight is won. Every one of us from all around the world. And we leave here with a message to the people of Iran and of Iraq. Mr. Maliki, you have the power and you can kill us. You have the jails and you can incarcerate us. Here is what you will not do. We will not be lied to. You killed our people. You have our hostages. You have the weapons. You are evil. You did this crime. You will pay a price. And to the people of Iran who may hear our voice over the internet or the radio, by tapes or by word of mouth, 52 brave souls have given their lives for your freedom, for you. Not the first, not the last. Children of Iran, each morning wake up and think of how, in your own way, you can take a stand for your people and your freedom. There is nothing in the stars that dictates that the people of Iran must live in slavery with no freedom. That which man has created, man can change. This can change. Revolutions begin and succeed by the acts of individuals, in individual acts of courage, like the 52 we mourn today. Somewhere in Iran there is someone who tomorrow can be that act of defiance. The world will stand with you, but you need to act first. For all of you, thank you for being here today. The people of liberty who hear our voice, we are with you. we will always be with you. To those of you who mourn the dead, God bless you, and may God hold them in a special place in his heart. For all of you, on to victory. Never give in, never give in, never give in. Thank you.